My coworkers hid my uniform so I'd get fired. Then the regional manager recognized me. What if a woman, humiliated by her coworkers' cruel games, is forced to stand her ground in the face of injustice? Hey, my name is Catherine. I never thought I'd be standing in the middle of a bustling diner, my heart pounding like a drum, feeling utterly exposed without my uniform. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversation, and the sharp scent of frying bacon seemed to mock me as I stood there, frozen, in my plain jeans and t-shirt. My coworkers' smirks burned into me, their whispers barely concealed behind fake coughs. They thought they'd won. They thought hiding my uniform would be the final push to get me fired. But they didn't know who was watching from the corner booth, someone who'd change everything. My name is Catherine, and I've spent most of my life trying to blend into the background. Growing up, I was the quiet kid, the one who never raised her hand, who preferred the safety of invisibility. That instinct followed me into adulthood, into this job at Danny's Diner, a greasy spoon on the edge of town where the coffee was always burnt and the customers were always in a hurry. I'd been a server for 3 years, keeping my head down, smiling through the chaos, and dodging the petty games my coworkers played. But that day, the game stopped being petty. It was a Thursday morning, the kind of shift where every table is filled and the orders pile up like a bad dream. I'd arrived early, as always, slipping into the break room to change into my uniform, a tacky red apron and a white polo with the diner's logo stitched crookedly on the chest. But when I opened my locker, it was empty. My uniform, my name, tag, everything gone. I checked the other lockers, the supply closet, even the trash bins out back, my panic growing with every empty-handed search. By the time I realized it wasn't an accident, the shift was starting, and my manager, Carl, was glaring at me from across the counter. "Catherine, you know the rules," he barked, his voice cutting through the din of the breakfast rush. "No uniform, no shift. You're on thin ice already." I tried to explain, my voice shaking as I stammered about my missing uniform, but Carl wasn't listening. He never did. To him, I was just another replaceable server, another name on the schedule. The other servers, Lisa, Tara, and Mike, were watching, their faces a mix of fake sympathy and barely hidden glee. I knew they'd done it. Lisa's smug grin as she polished a glass gave it away. They'd been gunning for me ever since I'd accidentally gotten a bigger tip share one night. In their eyes, I was an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their tight-knit little clique. The humiliation stung worse than I expected. Standing there, out of place in my street clothes, I felt like I was back in high school, the kid picked last for everything. My cheeks burned, and my throat tightened as I fought back tears. I wanted to scream, to call them out, to demand my uniform back, but I didn't. I never did. Instead, I mumbled an apology to Carl and turned to leave, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor. That's when I heard Eda's voice from the corner booth.com, but commanding. "Catherine, is that you?" I froze. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. I turned slowly, my heart still racing, and saw her. A woman in a sharp blazer, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes locked on me with a mix of surprise and recognition. It was Ms. Harper, the regional manager, someone I'd met only once before, years ago, at a training seminar. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not today. Not in this diner. In this moment of my unraveling. She stood, her presence silencing the chatter around her, and walked toward me. The other servers went quiet, their smirks fading. Carl's scowl softened into something like panic. Ms. Harper didn't look at them. She looked at me, her gaze steady, almost kind. "Catherine," she said again, softer this time. "I remember. You were the one who fixed that scheduling mess at the seminar, weren't you?" I nodded, barely able to speak. My mind was spinning. Why was she here? Why did she remember me? And what did this mean for the mess I was in? As she spoke, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. Someone saw me, not just the server in the wrong clothes, but me, Catherine. The person I'd buried under years of keeping my head down. But even as that spark of recognition lit something in me, the weight of the betrayal pressed harder. Lisa, Tara, Mike, they'd set me up to fail, to lose my job, to disappear entirely. And Carl, with his dismissive sneer, was ready to let it happen. I stood there, caught between the urge to shrink away and the faint, unfamiliar pull to stand my ground. Ms. Harper's presence was a lifeline. But it wasn't enough to erase the sting of what had happened. Not yet. I didn't know what would come next, whether I'd walk out that door and never come back, or if this was the moment that would finally push me to fight for myself. All I knew was that something had to change. Will I choose to stay silent, or will I take control of my own story? Standing there in the diner, with Ms. Harper's eyes on me, and the weight of my coworker's betrayal sinking in, I felt like I was unraveling. The hum of the breakfast rush faded into a dull roar, and all I could hear was the echo of my own thoughts, replaying every small slight, every whispered jab, every moment I'd let slide because I thought it was easier to stay quiet. Lisa's smirk, Tara's fake concern, Mike's snicker, they weren't just about the uniform. They were the culmination of months, maybe years, of smaller betrayals that I'd ignored, each one leaving a mark I hadn't wanted to see. I think back to the first time I noticed it. Maybe 6 months into working at Danny's diner. I'd been new, eager to fit in, memorizing orders with a kind of desperate precision. I thought if I worked hard enough, kept my head down, they'd accept me. But Lisa, with her sharp tongue and sharper smile, had other plans. It started with little things: misplacing my order pad, forgetting to tell me about a shift change, leaving me to scramble when a table complained. I'd laughed it off, told myself it was just hazing, that they'd warm up eventually. But they didn't. Tara would join in, her giggles masking the cruelty of leaving me out of their after-work plans. Mike was quieter, but his silence was worse. He'd watch, never stepping in, his loyalty always with them. One memory stings more than the rest. It was a slow Tuesday night, and I'd stayed late to help clean up a spill in the kitchen. I was exhausted, my feet aching, but I wanted to prove I was a team player. When I finally clocked out, I overheard Lisa in the break room, her voice low but clear. "Catherine's such a tryhard, thinks she's better than us with her perfect little orders." Tara had laughed, and Mike, as always, said nothing. I stood outside the door, my hand on the knob, wanting to walk in and say something, anything, but I didn't. I went home, cried into my pillow, and showed up the next day like nothing had happened. Those moments piled up, each one a tiny cut, too small to notice on its own but deep enough to scar. I'd told myself I was fine, that I didn't need their approval. But standing there in my street clothes, with Carl's glare and their smirks burning into me, I realized how much I'd let them chip away at me. I'd been so focused on surviving, on keeping the peace, that I'd buried the hurt. But now, with Ms. Harper's unexpected recognition pulling me into focus, those buried wounds were clawing their way to the surface. I glanced at Lisa, wiping down a counter with exaggerated care, her eyes flicking toward me like she was waiting for me to crack. Tara was refilling coffee, her lips twitching with suppressed amusement. Mike leaned against the wall, avoiding my gaze. They thought they'd won, that I'd slink away, tail between my legs, and let them have their victory. Part of me wanted, too. It would be so easy to leave, to find another job, to start over somewhere else. But Ms. Harper's voice, calm and steady, kept echoing in my head. "I remember you." Why did that matter so much? Maybe because it was the first time in years someone had seen me, not the server. Not the quiet girl who took the fall for their games, but me, Catherine, the one who'd fixed a scheduling mess at a seminar 2 years ago, who'd stayed up late studying the diner's handbook, who'd once dreamed of more than scraping by on tips. Ms. Harper's recognition was a crack in the armor I'd built. And through it, I could feel the anger I'd suppressed for so long, starting to seep out. But anger wasn't the only thing rising. There was shame, too, shame for letting it get this far, for staying silent while they pushed and pushed. I thought of my mom, who'd always told me to rise above and be the bigger person. I'd tried that, hadn't I? I'd smiled through their jabs, worked harder to prove them wrong, swallowed my pride so many times it felt like second nature. But where had it gotten me? Standing here, humiliated, with no uniform and a manager who'd rather fire me than listen. Ms. Harper was still watching me, her expression unreadable. Carl had retreated to the office, probably hoping to avoid her scrutiny. The diner kept moving around me, customers eating, plates clinking, coffee brewing, but I felt stuck, caught between the weight of those hidden betrayals and the faint possibility of something else. What was it? Hope? Defiance? I didn't know. Yet all I knew was that the girl who'd stayed quiet for so long was starting to feel like a stranger. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling at my sides. I could walk out that door, let them win, and carry these scars with me forever. Or I could stay, face the pain, and figure out what Ms. Harper's recognition meant for me. The choice felt bigger than this moment, bigger than the diner. It felt like the first step toward something I couldn't yet name. Can I confront the hidden wounds, or will they remain buried forever? The diner's noise pressed in on me, forks scraping plates. Customers calling for refills. The sizzle of the grill, but it was Ms. Harper's steady gaze that anchored me. Her words, "I remember you," echoed in my mind, a lifeline pulling me out of the fog of humiliation. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't want to disappear. I didn't want to let Lisa, Tara, and Mike's smirks define me. I didn't want to be the Catherine who shrank back, who let the world walk over her because it was easier. Standing there, in my mismatched jeans and t-shirt, I made a choice. I wasn't going to run. Not this time. I took a shaky breath and met Ms. Harper's eyes. "Yes, that was me," I said, my voice quieter than I wanted but steady enough to carry. "The scheduling thing, I didn't think anyone noticed." She smiled, just a small curve of her lips, but it felt like a spotlight. "I notice people who solve problems, Catherine. People who think on their feet." She glanced toward the counter, where Lisa was pretending to wipe the same spot for the third time. "Not everyone here does." Her words hit me like a spark. They didn't erase the sting of the morning, my missing uniform, Carl's dismissive sneer, the weight of my coworkers' betrayal, but they gave me something I hadn't felt in years. A glimpse of myself as someone capable, someone who wasn't just a victim of their games. I clung to that spark, letting it warm the cold knot of shame in my chest. "Ms. Harper gestured to the booth. "Sit with me for a minute. Let's talk." I hesitated. Carl was still in the office, probably fuming, and the other servers were watching like hawks. But something in Ms. Harper's tone told me this wasn't optional, not in a bad way, but in a way that said she saw something in me I'd forgotten was there. I slid into the booth across from her, my hands twisting in my lap. "I'm not supposed to be here today," she said, leaning forward slightly. "I was passing through town, thought I'd check in unannounced." "Good thing I did, considering." She trailed off, her eyes flicking toward my clothes. "Want to tell me? What happened?" I swallowed hard. The truth sat heavy on my tongue. Lisa, Tara, Mike, the uniform. The months of small cruelties, but saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. What if she didn't believe me? What if she thought I was making excuses? But then I remembered the way Lisa's smirk had faltered when Ms. Harper called my name. I remembered the years I'd spent swallowing my voice, letting their jabs fester. I was done with that. "They hid my uniform," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Lisa, Tara, and Mike. They've been doing things like this for a while. Trying to make me look bad. I think they want me gone." Ms. Harper didn't react right away. She just listened, her expression calm but focused, like she was piecing together a puzzle. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "That's a serious accusation, Catherine, but I believe you. I've seen their type before." Relief flooded me, but it was tangled with something else, anger, maybe, or resolve. For so long, I'd let their actions define my days, my mood, my sense of self. I'd told myself it was just how things were, that I had to endure it to keep my job, to keep my life steady. But sitting across from Ms. Harper, I realized enduring wasn't enough anymore. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to take control. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked, her question gentle but pointed. I blinked, caught off guard. "Me, yes, you." She leaned back, folding her arms. "You're the one they're targeting. You're the one who knows what's been going on. So, what do you want to do?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. I could feel the weight of my old habits pulling at me to shrug, to say I'd handle it, to go back to being invisible. But the spark she'd lit was growing, fed by the memory of every slight, every laugh behind my back. Every moment I'd let them win. I didn't have an answer yet, not a clear one, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them keep pushing me down. "I don't know yet," I admitted, my voice stronger now. "But I'm not going to let them get away with it. Not anymore." Ms. Harper nodded, like she'd expected that answer. "Good. Start there. Think about what you want, Catherine. Not just today, but for you. I'll be around for a couple of days. We'll talk again." She stood, leaving me at the booth, with my thoughts racing. The diner came back into focus, the clatter, the smells, the eyes of my coworkers darting toward me. Lisa whispered something to Tara, and they both laughed, but it didn't sting as much as it would have an hour ago. I was still angry, still hurt, but I was also awake. For the first time, I felt like I had a say in what came next. I didn't know how I'd face them, Lisa, Tara, Mike, even Carlor, what I'd do to take back my power. But the decision to act, to stop being the girl who took it all in silence, was like a key turning in a lock. The door wasn't open yet, but it was starting to crack. Can I find the courage to change my life, or will I hesitate when it matters most? The rest of that day at Danny's diner passed in a blur, but my mind was sharp, buzzing with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Ms. Harper's question, "What are you going to do about it?" had lodged itself in my chest, refusing to let go. As I wiped down tables, dodged Lisa's smirks, and ignored Tara's fake sweet "You okay, hun?" I was already turning over possibilities. I wasn't the Catherine who'd shrank away anymore. I was done being their punching bag. But if I was going to act, it had to be smart. No outbursts, no tears. I needed a plan, one that would hit them where it hurt and show them I wasn't invisible. I clocked out early, claiming a headache, and went home to my small apartment, where the quiet let my thoughts unfold. Sitting on my lumpy couch with a cup of tea, I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not a diary entry, not a rant, just a list. Every slight, every trick, every moment Lisa, Tara, and Mike had made me feel small. The missing order pad, the forgotten shift changes, the time they'd accidentally given my table to someone else, costing me a night's tips. Writing it down was like pulling thorns out of my skin, one by one. Each one stinging but necessary. By the time I finished, I had 2 pages of their petty cruelties, and the anger I'd buried for so long was burning bright. But anger alone wouldn't do it. I needed to be calculated, to turn their own game against them. They'd hidden my uniform to humiliate me, to get me fired. They thought they could control the narrative, make me the problem. Fine, I'd show them what it felt like to be exposed. The first step was understanding their weaknesses. Lisa was the ringleader, all confidence and sharp edges, but she was sloppy, always cutting corners, fudging her time cards, and flirting with customers to pad her tips. Tara followed Lisa's lead, desperate for approval, but she was careless, often forgetting orders or mixing up tables. Mike was the wild card, quiet, but he'd go along with anything to avoid conflict. And Carl, he was lazy, more interested in avoiding trouble than managing it. If I could prove what they'd done, not just to me but to the diner's bottom line, I could turn the tables. My plan started to take shape. Step 1. Evidence. I needed proof of their sabotage, something concrete to show Ms. Harper. I remembered the security camera in the break room, not high-tech, but it recorded everything. If I could get access to the footage from that morning, I might catch Lisa, or one of the others, messing with my locker. Step 2. Expose their patterns. I'd keep a log of every shortcut Lisa took, every mistake Tara made, every time Mike looked the other way. Step 3. Timing. Ms. Harper said she'd be around for a couple of days. I had to move fast, before they could cover their tracks or spin a story to make me look like the liar. I spent the next day at work hyper-aware, my notebook tucked in my apron pocket. I smiled at Lisa, nodded at Tara, even made small talk with Mike, all while watching. Lisa forgot to ring up a coffee order, pocketing the cash. Tara mixed up 2 tables orders, blaming it on the kitchen. Mike saw it all and said nothing. As usual, I jotted it down, time-stamped, in my notebook. When I got a chance, I slipped into Carl's office while he was out for a smoke and checked the security system. The footage was stored on a clunky old computer, password protected. But Carl was predictable, his password was Danny123. I didn't have time to watch it then, but I knew I'd find what I needed. That night, I lay awake, my heart racing with anticipation. This wasn't just about the uniform anymore. It was about every time I'd let them make me feel small, every time I'd stayed silent to keep the peace. My plan wasn't perfect, there were risks. What if the footage showed nothing? What if Ms. Harper didn't care? What if confronting them made things worse? But the alternative, doing nothing, letting them win, wasn't an option anymore. I thought of Ms. Harper's steady gaze, her belief in me, and it fueled me. I wasn't just fighting for my job. I was fighting for myself, for the Catherine who'd been buried under years of silence. The plan felt like a tightrope, and I was about to take my first step. I could almost taste the satisfaction of seeing Lisa's smirk falter, of watching Tara squirm, of making Mike face his own cowardice. But beneath the thrill, a small voice whispered, "Would this really fix anything? Will I feel victorious when it's over, or will the consequences leave me feeling empty?" The morning of the confrontation felt like the air before a storm, heavy, electric, ready to break. I walked into Danny's diner with my notebook in my pocket, the weight of my plan grounding me. My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was purpose. Lisa, Tara, and Mike had no idea what was coming. They thought they'd won when they hid my uniform, thought they'd pushed me out. But today, I was rewriting the story. Ms. Harper was still in town, and I had everything I needed to turn their game against them. I'd spent the night before combing through the security footage from Carl's office, my hands shaking as I fast-forwarded through grainy images. There it was, clear as day, Lisa, sneaking into the break room at 6:45 a.m., opening my locker and stuffing my uniform into her bag. Tara stood watch at the door, giggling nervously, while Mike lingered in the background, not helping but not stopping them either. The footage was golden, undeniable proof of their sabotage. I'd saved it on a USB drive, along with my detailed log of their other infractions, Lisa's pocketed cash, Tara's order mix-ups, Mike's complicity. It was enough to bury them. I waited until the lunch rush slowed, when the diner was quiet, enough for everyone to hear. Ms. Harper was in the corner booth again, sipping coffee, her presence like a silent promise. Carl was behind the counter, half asleep as usual. I took a deep breath and walked to the center of the dining area, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "Excuse me, everyone. I need to say something." The diner went quiet. Customers looked up from their plates. Lisa froze mid-pour, coffee dribbling onto the counter. Tara's eyes widened, and Mike shifted uncomfortably, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Carl emerged from the back, frowning. Ms. Harper set down her cup, her gaze locked on me. "I've been at this diner for 3 years," I started, my voice growing stronger with every word. "I've worked hard, kept my head down, and tried to be a team player. But some people here decided that wasn't enough." I looked straight at Lisa, whose smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Yesterday, my uniform went missing. It wasn't an accident. It was a setup to get me fired." A murmur rippled through the customers. Carl's frown deepened, but he didn't interrupt. I held up the USB drive. "I have proof. Security footage from the break room. Lisa, you took my uniform. Tara, you helped. Mike, you watched and did nothing." Lisa laughed, but it was forced, brittle. "That's ridiculous. Catherine, you're just making stuff up because you got caught without your uniform." I didn't flinch. "I'm not done. For months, you've been cutting corners, pocketing cash, messing up orders, making my life harder to push me out. I've got it all written down. Dates, times, details. Ms. Harper, I'd like you to see it." I walked to her booth and handed her the USB drive and my notebook. The diner was silent now, the air thick with tension. Lisa's face paled, Tara started babbling excuses, and Mike stared at the floor. Ms. Harper took the evidence without a word, her expression unreadable. "Catherine, this is thorough," she said finally, flipping through my notes. She turned to Carl. "Why wasn't any of this addressed?" Carl stammered, his face red. I didn't know." "She never said anything?" "Because I was scared," I admitted, my voice softening. "I thought if I spoke up, I'd lose my job. But I'm done being scared." Ms. Harper stood, her presence commanding the room. "Lisa, Tara, Mike, my office. Now, Carl, you too." She turned to me, her voice low. "Catherine, stay here. We'll talk after." They shuffled out, Lisa shooting me a venomous look, Tara on the verge of tears, Mike still avoiding my eyes. The customers whispered, some nodding approvingly. I stood there, my hands trembling, but not from fear. It was relief, raw and overwhelming. I'd done it. I'd faced them, exposed them, taken back the power they'd stolen from me, but as the adrenaline faded, a strange emptiness crept in. I'd expected to feel triumphant, like a weight had lifted. Instead, I felt hollow. Had I really won? Or had I just traded one kind of pain for another? I looked around the diner, the familiar tables, the worn counter, the life I'd clung to, and wondered if this was enough. Ms. Harper's belief in me, my own courage, it was a start. But was it closure? Will I feel relieved after this, or will it leave me questioning everything?